Salam, بفرما, hello and welcome. In this video, we are going to go through the first 8 letters of the Persian alphabet, or Alef Ba. Now, this video is going to assume some knowledge, which we covered in the introduction video. So that video just covers some fundamentals of the Persian language. So if you haven't seen that, I would encourage you to go and watch that before you watch this. In terms of what this video will cover, basically we're going to go through each letter one at a time. We're going to draw the letter together, see the letter in some common words, and also look to pronounce the letter as well. So drawing the letter, pronouncing the letter, and seeing it in some words. Okay, let's start with the first letter of the alphabet, Aleph. Great. So Aleph is the first letter of the alphabet, and I would say it's kind of most similar to the English letter A. Now, I want to say up front that Aleph, or covering Aleph in this video, it's going to be the most complex letter that we'll cover in this video. And that's because of its two forms. But let's just start, let's go through it. I don't think any individual idea here is confusing. It's just that there's a kind of few things to keep in mind when you're using or seeing Aleph. So the first form is simply a straight line. You start from the top and you draw down. Something like this. Okay, Aleph. And the second form is very similar. Okay, it's just that after you draw the line, you give it a little hat. Okay, and hopefully your lines are straighter than mine. And I do encourage you to draw along with me, get some pen and paper out. It's really good to start practicing and helps to make you really familiar with these different letters. So, what's the difference between these two forms? And the difference, it relates to which vowel sound you want to make with the Aleph. So, let's firstly recap our vowel sounds. So we have 3 short vowels, right? You probably remember this. I hope so. We have an A, we have an E, and we have an O. Okay, these are our short. Just conscious of space. Short. And then we have 3 long vowels, right? We have the A, the E, and the U. Okay, and these are our long vowels. And these 3 are actually letters of the Alef Ba, whereas these are more, you can think of them more like accents that you add to letters. So let us say that we wanted to start a word with an A, right? This first guy here. It's pretty easy. It's kind of what you might expect. We would just use the Aleph and we would just put the accent on top, right? A. And let me just explain what we've got here. This is the word Aleph, right? This second symbol here is like the L, and this third symbol here is like the F, right? So we start and we want this A, so we use the Aleph, we put the accent on top, we get Aleph. And it's quite similar if you want the E. If you want to start a word with E, you use the Aleph, and you put the E below it. And again, very similar if you want the O, right? This Aleph, put the O on top. So how about for the long vowels, right? It starts very similarly. So if we wanted to start a word with an E, the E, we would go, Aleph and add the E, right? Similarly, if we wanted the U, we would have an Aleph and we would add a Vav. This letter is called Vav, and it can make a U or a V sound. For the purposes of the vowel, it makes the U sound. But then the question is, what do you do if you want the R sound at the start, right? So hopefully we're getting kind of familiar with this idea that, let me just pick a different color, that the Aleph at the start is kind of like a placeholder for adding vowels, whether they're short or long vowels. And if we have this ah, kind of like a blank canvas, right? We can make it an ah for Alef. We can make it a eh. We can make it a or. We can add a yeah. We can add a vav. So we're getting all our different vowel sounds, right? But what about if we wanted the ah? And what would we do? We would just add another Alef, double Alef. The short answer is no. No, no, no. We do not do that. That is where the Alef with the hat comes in. Ah, ah. And you will only see this form at the start of a word. Okay, you will never see the R in the middle of a word. If you have the R sound in the middle of the word, it'll just look like a normal Aleph. And that is, I think, why Aleph is going to be our trickiest letter. Just kind of keeping that in mind that, at the start, if you want the R sound, it'll have the hat, but in the middle, it won't have the hat. I think that can be a little bit tricky. But let's go through a few examples, which I hope can kind of clarify. So we have our first word here. We have an Aleph with a hat, so we should know immediately that this is an R, R. And the second letter is a be, be. So it's like a B. And we kind of go from right to left. We have the transliteration. It makes ob, ob. And if you're willing and able, I encourage you to kind of pronounce it with me as well. It never hurts to start practicing earlier. Ob, and ob means water. Next we have this symbol here is like a M, right? And here we have this kind of Aleph, but with no accent, with no vav afterwards or yeah afterwards. It's this Aleph. It's that form where it kind of should have a hat, but because it's in the middle, because it's not at the start of the word, we don't include it, right? So, how do you think we pronounce this? It should be mama, mama. And I think no points for guessing what mama means. Mama means mum. Mama. And similarly, we actually have the word here, which you'll see on every kind of page, Farsi, right? I hope you remember this from our previous video as well. Here is an Aleph. Here is an Aleph right here, the second kind of symbol. I'm underlining it. And again, this is the ah sound, the one that maybe should have a hat, but because it's in the middle of the word, we don't include it. So it's Farsi, Farsi, the Aleph here. Okay, let's keep going. So here we have an Aleph, and it's followed by a Vav, which makes the U vowel sound. And this third letter is like an N, so we get Un, Un. And that means that. Un means that. Finally, we have an Aleph followed by, this is like an S, this is like an M, and just very quickly, obviously it's not possible for me to use words or introduce words without introducing letters that aren't Aleph, right? But I would encourage you to focus on the Aleph, focus on making sure it's clear in every word where Aleph is, and just trust that you're slowly getting familiar with the other letters. And I bet you by the time we actually get to Sin, which is like this S, or Nun, which is this N sound, you'll actually probably already know what it is. So I think you are learning multiple letters right now, but the focus should be just on Aleph at this point. Anyway, back to this word here. So we have this Aleph with the accent below, so it's like a E, and we have S and M, it's esm. Esm, and esm means name. Great. I think this was our hardest letter. I think it's all downhill from here. And yeah, I think it's our hardest letter because of this kind of trickiness with the hat on top, and this kind of feeling that the Aleph at the start is a placeholder for different vowel sounds. Yeah, I hope everything here was clear. But yeah, let's go on to the next letters. I think these ones will be a bit easier, hopefully a bit more fun as well. So the second letter of the Alef Ba is Be. Be. So Be is like the English letter B. And let me go to teal. Teal here, like the English letter B. Okay, and it has two forms. Okay, and it's not not like Aleph where we have all these differences in potential differences in pronunciation. Oh, it's always pronounced the same. Of course, whoops, let me just put this nicely on the line, and we'll put the dot below. Be. Okay, I'll do 3 of these, and you're going to see that the next 2 or 3 letters are very, very similar to Be. It's just that they have a different number of dots, either above or below. So get used to this shape. Okay, so we have these 2 forms of Be. This one you'll see kind of at the start of words or in the middle of words when it's going to attach to different letters. This one you'll see at the end or when it's by itself. So let's go through the words we have here. And if you remember from the previous page, we actually already had a Be. So we had the Aleph and the Be, and we get Ab, which means water. Ab. Next, we actually just flip these 2 letters around, but we remember that Aleph with the hat, when it's not at the start of the word, we don't have the hat, so we get Ba, Ba, and Ba means with. Now we have 2 bars together, Ba Ba, Ba Ba, and that means dad. So you could say something like Ba Ba Ba, which means with dad. We might have just said our first partial sentence, first clause maybe. And then finally, we have an interesting cognate with between English and Persian, or perhaps just a coincidence, but we have here a be, and I've just forgotten the accent, so let me add it here. An a, and then we have a de. So that becomes, so this here is like a de, a d. Bad, bad, and bad means bad. Bad, bad means bad. Great. Let us move on to the next letter. The third letter of the Persian alphabet is Pe. And Pe is kind of like a P. P. And this simply says Pe, right? So, again, this should be now a bit familiar. It's exactly like Be, but whereas with Be we had 1 dot kind of centered below it, with Pe we have 3 dots. With the kind of bottom dot, kind of centered. Now let me just draw this. It should be nicely on the line here, our reference line. So this is kind of the best one, right? This gap is not too good. Okay, so let me just be a bit more precise here with the second form, and again, it's a very similar to what we've already seen before. Be, Pe, sorry, not Be. Pe. Okay, great. So we have Pe, and we add an Aleph, and we get Pa. Pa. And Pa means foot or leg. So in Persian, we don't actually have a word to differentiate between, your leg and the thing at the end of it, your foot. We call both of those Pa. You have to kind of infer from context which one is being referred to. Next, we have here our pair at the start. And this guy here with the dot on top, that is like an N. And this guy here with the dot below is like a J. Okay, so we get pa, a, n, j. Panj. Panj. And panj means 5. Okay, so now we have 2 letters that look very similar, both with 3 dots below. So, but I want to make it clear that we do not have pe here. We don't have 2 pairs. We have at the start another symbol which has a base like this, okay? And similar to how bear and pear and other letters have the same core structure, but different number of dots above or below. This is a similar thing where we have this base structure, and you might put a dot on top or some dots below to get different sounds. And in this case, this 3 dots below character, and my dots are not looking very good. This is like a che. Okay, so with that in mind, we can see that we have the pe next. We get a che, and a, and a pe. We get chap. Chap. And chap means left. Next, we have a pe at the start again. We follow it with this vav, this long vowel vav, and the lam, the L. Now, I think this one's a nice one to remember because it's kind of like if I were to have a little line of reflection here and just reflect that. To me, that kind of looks like an English L, right? Maybe not. Maybe that's just going to confuse you. Let me get rid of it. But we know that this here is like a double O, this vowel, and we have the P here. So we have something like pool, pool, and pool means money, money, pool. Okay, random dollar symbols. Great, let us go on to the next letter. Okay, we have next, very similar to what we've just been through, bear and pear. Now we have tear, which is like a T. So you might be, let's keep drawing, let's keep practicing, it never hurts. But you're probably getting quite familiar with this this base structure. 2 dots on top now though, which gives us the tear. And just one thing to mention is sometimes instead of 2 dots, you might see a line. Okay, it's kind of like a shorthand, like a quicker version. You might see someone just be like, te. And similarly, just to go back to what we were talking about earlier with the pair, you might see someone with the 3 dots below. So the pair look like that, right? They might just draw it like this. Whoops, something like that, right? Again, it's just sort of like a shorthand notation. Now let us press on with the te. Te. This one definitely looks a little bit like a smiley face. Okay, and we'll do the third one with the line. Okay, these are like te. These are not like te, these are te. Okay, so again, we're continuing this trend of just adding an aleph and getting a word. So we have our te, we add our aleph, and we get ta. Ta. And ta means until. Until. Next, okay, we have a little bit of a complicated letter here, or what might appear to be a complicated word. We start with our be. Okay, we should be familiar with this. Then this thing, which to me looks like a butterfly's wing, at least half of a butterfly's wings, or half of the set. This is like an H. Okay, then we have our te here. Okay, so you can see it's got that little base, the 2 dots on top. There is our te, and then finally we have this hook at the end, which is a new letter that is like an R. Okay, so taking it all together, we have a be, an e accent, a he, a te, an a, and a re. Behtar. 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 And it actually means better. Again, maybe it's just a coincidence, maybe there's some link there, but behtar means better. Now let's go on to some shorter words, just to make life a bit easier after that complicated one. In the next 2 words, we start with a te, and we have an accent on top. So maybe think about how that might be pronounced. I'll give you a second before I reveal the answer. And for this guy, the next letter is a K, like the K, and here it's like an N. So we have tak here and tan here. Tak, tan. Tak means only or single. Tan means body. Okay, let's keep going. Next, we have 3 dots above, and this is se, which is like an S. So, 3 dots below, do you remember which one that was? That was pe. 3 dots above, se. Okay, now I don't blame you if at this point you're maybe a little bit tired of drawing all these same symbols, but if you get really good at this, you're getting really good at, many, many letters at once. That's the good thing. And you can see I'm still not too good. Look at these dots. Not a good job. Let's try to do better here. Oh. Se. Se. One more. Try to do a good one here. Okay, we're off to a good start. Oh, okay. Not the best dots, but we'll live with it. Okay, so let's cover the words now, eh? Here, I was actually quite excited because I found a word that used only letters that we're already familiar with. So we start with the se, then we add an alef, so we have saw, then we have our pe, be, then we have our te, right? So all together, saw, bet, saw, bet, saw, bet, which means to prove. Next, we have our alef, our se, and I'll just be nice here and remind you that this hook is like an R. So we have asar, 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 which means effect. Next, we have, again, only letters that we are already familiar with. Asos, 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 which means furniture. And then finally, we have some letters we haven't explicitly covered. So let me just remind you that first thing is like an M. This last thing is an L. And in the middle we have our se. So with this accent we get mesl. Mesl. And that means like. And it's not the like as in, when you enjoy something, not like, hey, I really like that movie. It's more the like for when you're making a comparison. So mesl is kind of like the like you would use when you say, oh, I'm just struggling to think of an example. A lion is like a tiger. Mesl is like that like. Okay, next letter, here we come. Our next letter, we have now moved away from our tried and true form of letters, where we just had kind of the same base with a varying number of dots. And we have here jim, jim. And jim is like a J, J. So let us draw a jim. Kind of get this guy here, lives on the line, and a dot below. And similar to how our previous letters, adding or subtracting dots, positioning dots above or below, could give us different letters. It's the same for this letter structure here. So one dot below gives us J, a jim, or a J sound, but different dots will give us different sounds. Okay, and again, maybe you're kind of getting familiar with this idea that we have one form for when it's at the start or in the middle, and another form for when it's at the end or by itself. So, continuing with this trend of just adding an alef and getting a word, we have a jim and we add an alef, and that gives us jaw, which means place. Jaw, jaw. Next, we have our pair here. We notice one, there's 3 dots below. That's a pair. We have an A accent. And this guy here is like a N, 1 dot above. N, nun. And we have our J at the end. So putting it all together, panj, panj, which means 5. Next, we have, and I did mention to you that having this same base symbol with a dot, in a different position can give us a different letter. So let's see that now. Start with the same base, but we put the dot above. And this gives us a sound that is not found in English explicitly. Khe. Some people like to kind of go KH. That's my preference. I think some people also just put an X there, it's the weird letter. But yeah, the sound it makes is a khe, a khe. Then we add to that this hook, which is like an R, and we get kharj, kharj. And kharj means to spend. Kharj. Finally, we have our jim at the start with the accent on top. And this guy here is like a D. And we have our tried and true, our trusty Alef. So we have joda, 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 which means separate. Okay, 2 letters to go. Next, we have che, 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 which is like a CH. And as I said, having this base symbol with different numbers of dots can give us different letters. So 3 dots below gives us a CH type of sound, a che. Okay. I feel like my handwriting is getting worse as I keep going through this video, but I will persevere. Okay. Wow, not good at all. Okay, let me try to draw one at least, how it's meant to look. Okay, a bit better. I think I just want to make it clear that this line should be kind of at our reference. Okay, this last one is looking quite good. Something like that. And that gives us a che. So, we have already seen the che and the word chap. Remembering that the pair and the che both have 3 dots below. So, we have chap, chap, which meant left. And just to make it clear, left as in left hand or right hand, not left as in, you left something behind. Does not mean that left. And believe it or not, che itself is actually a word, quite an important word. So here we have a che, e, and this guy here is kind of like an H, like a che, kind of like an H. So you might want to think of this like che, che, which is kind of like what or which. One of these like kind of question type words that is used in a lot of different places. So definitely make sure to remember this one. Che, che. Next, we have our che at the start, and 2 letters we've seen but haven't explicitly covered. So let me just remind you what these are. We have a ne, a nun, and then a kind of D at the end. So we get che, a, n, d, chand, chand. And this can mean kind of like how much or several. So, maybe if you were in a shop in Iran and you just looked at the shopkeeper and you held up the gum you wanted to buy, and if you said to that shopkeeper chand, even though it's not, the exact way you should say it, they'd know what you meant. They'd know that you meant like, how much is this? How much? So chand. And it can also mean like several, like maybe you say something like chand ruz dige. Ruz means day, and dige kind of means like later. So chand ruz dige might mean several days later. Chand ruz dige bia. Come here, come back in a few days. Okay, Now, we have 3 letters that we should know at this point. So, give it a go. Think about how you might pronounce this yourself. But I'll spoil it now. Chop. Chop. So previously we had up the top chap with the ah accent. Now we've got chop with the alef here. And chop means to print. Okay, let us move on to the final letter. And the final letter is he. And he is, so let me just draw this out, mostly like an English H. And it takes that same base symbol and you actually add no dots. No dots gives you the he. But otherwise, it is exactly the same as the je and the che. There we go. Okay, so first word actually uses every single, all the letters are letters that are familiar here. So we have a be, an a, the he, and the pe. Sorry, the se. So we have bas, bas. And bas means to discuss. I think it can also mean kind of like to argue. So it's like a discussion, an argument, this type of thing. Bas. Next, we have just this re at the start, which is an unfamiliar letter. But then we have re, alef, he, and te. Rahat. Rahat. And rahat means easy or comfy. Next, we have this first symbol here. I'll just draw it out just to make it even clearer. Okay, it looks kind of like this here. I would usually draw it like this. Okay, this guy, that's like an S. S. Okay, and then we have our be here and our he. Sob. Sob. And sob means morning. Now here we have so. Okay, so quite a similar start. Then we have a bat at the end. So bat. So bat. And I should have a AT here. So bat. And so bat means to speak. Okay, great. That is the first 8 letters done. I'll see you in the next video for letters 9 through 16.